We're back with day 3 of Dominion Menagerie previews. And Dominion Menagerie previews, in case you really hated my horrible, horrible accent there. We've got another new mechanic to talk about today, and that is Exile. This is the art from the Exile mat, I suppose. And basically, the rules on Exile are, I guess, fairly simple, although I imagine some of the specific cards, as we're about to see, may have some less straightforward things. Anyway, so this is your exile mat. And it says when you gain a card, you may discard all other copies of it from here. So there are various ways of getting things on this mat. I think the only way you're going to be able to is if a card tells you to put something here, or in a card-shaped object tells you to put something here, right? It could be an event. I think Donald in his thing said there were either events or landscapes that help you put things in exile. So expect that to be coming. But there will be something that will tell you to put a card here in exile. Cards in exile aren't in your deck, but they are still your cards. So for scoring, they count for scoring. I think that's mostly what there is to there. When you gain a card, you can take the cards that are on the mat that have the same name as that card that you just gained. So let's say I have 3 silvers on the exile mat. I don't even know if that's possible. But let's say I have 3 silvers on the exile mat and I gain a silver. It doesn't have to be buying it, can be gaining it in whatever way I'd be gaining it. Can even exchange it for a changeling, right? You still gain it then. You then have the option to either take all of your 3 silvers from the mat into your discard pile, or leave them all here. You can't take 1 or 2. It's all or nothing. At least that's how I'm reading this. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's how it is. Anyway, let's look at the 3 cards previewed today, which all make use of this mechanic. So the first one is Bounty Hunter. Bounty Hunter is a 4-cost action. It says +1 action, exile a card from your hand. If you didn't have a copy of it in exile, you get 3 money. Yeah, this looks really good at first blush because it's kind of like Moneylender or a Priest, but it's non-terminal, and it makes more money than Priest, and unlike Moneylender, it can exile estates instead of just coppers or other cards, right? So that looks really strong on first blush. The issue is, well, there's a couple issues. One, the thing isn't trashed permanently, which might be good or might be bad, depending. And 2, it only makes money the first time you exile a thing with that name. So your first estate you get rid of, it's really great, right? You have a hand of this and 3 coppers and an estate. You exile the estate, you have 6, you can buy, any 5 or 6 you want. You have 2 estates, 2 coppers in this, you exile an estate, you have 5, you still hit 5. Really, really good, right? It's thinning your estates and giving you 3 money, and it's non-terminal at the start of the game. That's a huge boost to your economy, both the thinning of the estate and the right. So on turn 3 or 4, this card is excellent. The problem is now it's turn 5 or 6 and I already have an estate exiled. I can exile another one, but I'm not getting any money now. So now, I have my hand of silver, copper, copper, this an estate, and if I exile another estate, I only hit 4. I mean, in that case, I can still exile another copper and hit 6 again, but now I have copper and estate on the mat, and now this thing isn't going to make me any money unless I start exiling other cards, and usually I'm not going to be adding other cards to my deck that are bad, that I would want to exile, I guess, is a better way of saying than that are bad. Having said all that, I still think the card is pretty darn strong. Early is more important than late, and the fact that this isn't going to make money for you later is probably not really that big of a deal. I mean, it is that big of a deal. It is. But I don't know that it's as big of a deal as getting the big economy boost early and thinning and doing the thinning non-terminally, right? People sometimes open Forager just planning to trash a state on turns 3 and 4 and making no money off of that. Um, this is going to do that later, but early on it still gives you the money, and I'd rather have the money early than the money late in general, right? Um, in the case that you're exiling estates, it's probably better to exile them than trash them because you still get the points from them. It's a very minor difference because 1 point or 3 points or however many points you end up with estates in exile is not a big deal, typically. I think this card also seems like it would probably work pretty well with um, things that lose their power over time, which is mostly like early trashers. So like remake and this, they both cost 4, so you can't really open them together. So it probably won't really come up. But I don't know if it's on an alms board. You have some other trasher that you're using that maybe trashes a little bit faster, gets rid of some of the stuff. This is non-terminal, so if they collide, I'm trying to think of a good one uh, here, then it's not so easy. So maybe that just won't come up much. You can open this with a terminal, which is pretty nice, because if they collide, who cares? Um, I think this card will be good, but not great, just in terms of just the turn 3, 4, to some extent 5, 6 money boost you get is going to be very good. You probably want some other trasher to help you clean up some more of your coppers in particular at some point, I think. So like an upgrade or a junk dealer or a sentry or something like that at some point is probably going to be good. And or you do a little bit of exiling with this early and then you trash it, right? So if it's a trash for benefit kind of thing, you get your early boost out of this and then you trash it for something else. That also seems like a good play pattern to me. Also, it seems really good against ruins, which mostly I think means it's going to be a very effective counter to Marauder. The ruins you're going to get are going to likely have different names for quite a bit. You're going to be able to keep making money off of this as you thin them reasonably efficiently. Not that it's like, oh my gosh, I would have rather never had the ruins, although maybe, I guess. But more that it handles ruins pretty well, and the ruins hardly hurt you, and the Marauder is a dead card in their deck, so do this instead. Against Cultist, it seems like it's probably a bit slow at cleaning things up, but I don't know, maybe it can come into play if you're doing some various things. Card seems very good to me, but you probably don't want to go too overboard on it in most situations. Like some of the other cards from this set, it seems like something you want probably one copy of um, in a lot of games. Occasionally you'll skip. Not even that, super rarely, but because again, if you have like mass thinning, you probably go for that more than this. I mean, you could even pair it with Chapel, right? It thins you a little bit of stuff, you Chapel away most of it, and then eventually you bounty hunt away your Chapel. And oh, I guess I should note, right, late in the game, you bounty hunt your province, your duchy, your all that stuff. Since it's not trashing it, you're very happy to get rid of it. It's kind of like islanding it, and you still make money off of it. So it lets you green more effectively without hurting you as much too. So that's actually a really, really nice feature of this card. Yeah, this card looks very good given that. I hadn't thought of that exactly, but that also seems like a very good thing. It helps you green a little bit more. So money decks probably like this. If it's the only thinning, that might actually tend you towards a money deck. If it goes with other thinning, then probably not. If the other thinning is trash for benefit, then maybe so. But if it's with other thinning, then it's probably going to be good in a draw more deck as well. But let's move on to the second card, because this is a lot of talking I've been doing about this card. These cards all seem a bit hard to wrap my mind around, so I feel a lot less certain than I did in the previous 2 days. Not that I was super certain then, but let's move on to Stockpile, which is a 3-cost treasure that gives you 3 money and a buy, so there must be a catch. And there is. When you play it, you have to exile it. So it's a one-shot for 3 money and a buy, but you can get it back by gaining another Stockpile. Um, this card seems very good to me. So I'm going to first start by thinking about money. And in a money deck, this is going to help me hit 5 and 6 very reliably, I imagine. I open stockpile, stockpile, and it's going to help me hit 5 and 6 quite reliably. Now, you do have to note that you are going to then not have these stockpiles. Sometimes maybe you open stockpile silver. I don't know. I haven't run the math on this. This is going to get rid of your stockpiles, so that's less good. But I suspect that if what you're trying to buy on 6 is gold, then like say you hit 5 and you get a 5, and then you hit 6, and that the order at which you do that is going to be important, as we're going to see in a second. If you hit 6, you could buy like silver and another one of these, or maybe just 2 more of these, and then you have them all back, right? And you have a bunch of money on your next shuffle as well. So I mean, you're just hitting your higher price points a lot more reliably, a lot more quickly. The issue is you do need to keep buying stockpiles or your deck suddenly falls apart. And eventually the pile runs out. And then when you play all the stockpiles, they're gone forever. Unless you can do some cheeky gain and play, regain them, which maybe you can. There's a few cards that help you gain from the trash that might help you continue to use this. Mostly I'm thinking of Treasurer here, where you can, with a couple Treasurers, you may be able to trash this and then regain it, but it's going to be a little bit tricky to do so, especially in a money deck, right? Because if your opponent has a Treasurer, they gain the stockpile out from under you, and it's very sad times for you. But if there's a way you can trash it and regain it on the same turn, there's, I think, 3 cards that I can think of that might be able to gain this from the trash. Then that's a way that you can continually keep gaining these things, even after the pile empties. But let's not dwell on that too much, right? In general, I think, again, I'm starting out just thinking of this with money in mind. It seems to be very good. In terms of just, again, the early money is so important to help you hit your later price points. And in fact, I think, if I think about it for a second, right, I open this, and on my next shuffle I get gold, let's say, right? And I don't have the stockpiles in my deck anymore. I have 2 golds and my starting cards. Typically for money, a gold is better than 2 silvers. So compare that to getting silver, 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 silver on my first 4 turns, and I think I've come out ahead. And obviously, in some of those cases, I'm going to be able to rebuy stockpiles, and now my deck is suddenly much, much better. So I think this is just really upside. But you are going to have to manage the ability to get them back when you want, and it's not going to be necessarily trivial to do, especially considering managing when the pile runs out. And your opponent, well, if they never go for these, then you're probably very happy. But if they go for them eventually, to mostly as a denial thing, and it doesn't hurt them that much because they're going to get their money and their buy back the one time they play this, you have to keep that in mind, that that's something that they can do as well. Still, I think it's going to be very hard for me to think that this card isn't very strong, given that the biggest weakness of it seems to be, well, if the pile runs out. So kind of like Lackeys, where it's really, really good, but you have to manage your villagers. It doesn't give you villages forever. I think Stockpile is going to be really, really good, but you have to manage your ability to keep taking them back from exile. It won't last forever. But it's hard for me to imagine this card isn't good. If you're drawing more, then if you have a gainer, it seems particularly good. If you don't have a gainer, it seems fine, I guess. Honestly, I think the running out is more of a concern there in some ways. Uh, but I don't think it's going to really change what you want to do, whether you're trying to draw or not, very much. Early on, money that isn't necessarily going to stick around might actually be a good thing for those kinds of decks as you're trying to thin, and then you can take them back from exile later. Um, and then in the late game, if you have a gainer and you're drawing your deck, it can be really nice because your econ is all on your exile mat, which is going to help you be a lot more reliable in drawing your deck. And then you play your one gainer, you get all this econ back, you draw a little bit more. And basically, it just basically ensures that your payload is all at the bottom of your shuffle because it starts not even in your deck, right? So that's really nice property for those kinds of decks. So in general, I just think that this is a very, very strong card. I think this is probably even stronger than the Bounty Hunter, although these both seem pretty good to me and better than most of the cards we've seen so far. Finally, we're going to get to Coven. Coven is a 5-cost action attack, plus an action, plus 2 money. Each other player exiles a curse from the supply. If they can't, they discard their exiled curses. So this is a curse giver that's non-terminal. But the curses all go to exile. So for a long time, this doesn't actually junk them. It gives them negative points, but doesn't junk them. And eventually, if the curses run out, then suddenly they're getting a lot of junk all at once, right? I think if there are other curse givers, you're going to prefer the other curse giver a big majority of the time. I guess maybe if you can only play one terminal per turn and there's some other terminal that you really, really need to play, you might go with this and that terminal as opposed to a terminal curse giver. But in general, I think that the other curse giver is going to outclass this. But let's say this is the only curse giver. Is this good? Well, it doesn't really hurt their deck control. 10 curses, if you can play enough of these fast enough that you will get them gone before the game ends, suddenly they're going to have, right? If we're thinking about one person goes for this and the other person doesn't, if they're going to end up with 10 curses all of a sudden, all at once, then their deck is going to start feeling the hurt all of a sudden, all at once. And it's going to hurt a lot. A lot of times with curses, you can kind of trash them as you take them. The curses, you could potentially, if you really need to do that, you can buy a curse if you have a spare buy. So you get them earlier if you're going to take them anyway, and you can trash them. It doesn't seem like a common play pattern, but I could see it coming up sometimes if you have fairly good trashing that trashes 1 and 2 cards at a time, and your opponent's gone for this. Yeah, I don't really think that's going to happen too much, but I could definitely see it coming up maybe. More to the point, let's say this is the only curse giver, and well, how many you need to play it 10 times before their deck gets worse, right? 10 times is kind of a lot, and if you want to be doing other stuff on 5, it's, you know, if you only have one of these, it's not that easy to necessarily play it 10 times before the game is over, or effectively over, because they're doing something better because they have some other strong 5 that helps them more than this. So I think that is a bit of a concern. But if you get this off, then the 10 curses hurts a lot. And it really kind of depends on what the nature of the thinning is, and or right how far ahead they are at that point in the game, right? If they've already been able to get 7 provinces and then suddenly you dump them with 10 curses, probably it doesn't matter that they have 10 curses. If they have 5, then the 10 curses might slow them down enough that you're able to come back. I don't know. I think it's going to depend on a lot. Also, if they're, say, drawing their deck and have a forge, then probably they just trash all 10 curses. You know, if they know this is coming, they can get overdraw. They can trash all their curses at once, and you hardly hurt them. But if their trashing is many other things, it's going to be hard once they get 10 all at once. I guess donate, right? Also, boom, they get rid of all 10 at once. But most things can only trash 1, 2, Chapel even only trashes 4. I guess Count does more, although it's going to be hard to get a count off when at that point in the game. Um, it's going to be hard to trash them if they're taking 10 all at once, right? Um, so that's something to note. I think in general this is still much weaker than most other curses because sometimes you can ignore it. The other thing to note though about the 10 is just minus points, and the one positive I can see it having over other curse givers is if they're trying to slow trash, uh, they can't get rid of the negative points so easily because the curses aren't in their deck. So if the points themselves are pretty important, then Coven starts to look good. And you don't want too many because, well, actually, even too many isn't even that bad. So yeah, if the points are going to be important, then it might be good. And getting 2 to get them to have a lot of junk faster, especially because it's non-terminal. I think this card is still going to be very strong, but markedly weaker than most other cursors. Maybe more along the lines of Soothsayer. Maybe a bit better than Soothsayer. Somewhere in the Soothsayer kind of range. Probably a bit better than Soothsayer even, maybe, on average. But closer to Soothsayer than the power level of the others. Real interesting mechanic, and this is the mechanic so far in the day so far that I expect that when I do my review of these on the podcast, which I will at least plug also on this channel, if not cross-post to this channel, then I will probably have the most updates on these cards in terms of my opinion has changed and I was wrong about them. But this is my initial scalding hot takes. If you disagree, if you want to leave a comment, please do. If there's something I've missed, please let me know about it. Anyway, we'll see you tomorrow where I think we're going to be learning about landscapes, including something called ways, I want to say. But we'll see you then, and keep the discussion going for now. Thanks for watching, everybody.